If you're thinking about becoming a landlord in Canada or you just signed your first rental already, I want to share how I lost $35,000 as a beginner landlord and what it taught me to do differently. I've been sharing this with thousands of other landlords in hopes they don't also make these same mistakes that I did. And I hope this helps you avoid my mistakes. Okay, let's flash back to when I was 23. I had bought my first place. I was pumped. I was proud and I thought I was building wealth. Yes. But I didn't realize that I was also stepping into a massive, regulated legal machine that I barely understood. A few months later, my tenants just decided to stop paying me. So the rent checks stopped. By the time I'd finally gone through it, I'd lost over $35,000 in unpaid rent and legal fees. That really sucked. But besides the money, the stress was actually worse. Like endless court hearings and stacks of paperwork. I felt totally stuck because the system was dragging its feet while my mortgage payments were still very much due every single month, along with all the other expenses. So today, I want to talk about what I wish I knew back then, because even after all of that, this was still one of the best moves I have ever made for my family. You just have to know how the game is actually played. First off, you play by new rules now. When you get that first rental, you feel like it's this really exciting real estate play. I felt that too. But once you're in it, you realize you're now responsible for things like the Residential Tenancies Act, and you're answering to the Landlord and Tenant Board now. Your file becomes all about deadlines and very specific forms. Everyone talks about how being a landlord is supposedly passive income, but in reality, it's a full-time job staying compliant with the whole host of regulations. For example, if someone stops paying you rent, you can't just shoot them a text. You have to serve a very specific document known as an N4 here in Ontario, and that document is pretty super picky. It needs the exact rent arrears, the perfect postal code, and the termination date has to be calculated down to the day. If you mess up the court or put a utility bill on there that shouldn't be there, the whole thing gets tossed out. The board doesn't care if you're a nice person. They care if the paperwork is perfect. It's things like that that can really screw you over if you aren't educated on your responsibilities as a landlord. In fact, that exact example was my first big wake-up call. Next, dealing with non-payments. When my tenants stopped paying, I'll be honest, I took it very personally. I felt like I was being targeted, but I had to realize that non-payment of rent is just a part of the math of the business. It's a risk model, not a personal vendetta. If you're in the housing business, you have to expect that at some point, someone is going to stop paying or try to fight the system. Your job isn't to get angry or to panic, but to calmly move through the steps. The N4, then the L1, and then the hearing. If you treat it like a standard operating procedure instead of a personal battle, your stress levels will drop significantly. By the way, a lot of landlords don't know what to actually expect at that hearing. It sounds complicated, but a hearing isn't like what you see in a courtroom drama. It's usually more like a short session with a board member where both sides get to present their case. You'll show your paperwork, the tenant gets to respond, and the member makes a decision. It's usually quite anticlimactic. If your documentation is solid, it's pretty straightforward. Then, when you win, you walk away with a piece of paper called a court order, which doesn't seem like much, and honestly, it doesn't really do much. But I'll share about that in a moment. We've actually built a powerful tool around that piece of paper to help landlords all across Canada share their court orders and make them searchable so other landlords, including yourself, finally have a way to help each other as a community and see if a potential applicant tenant has any past court orders against them. I won't get into it too much just yet, but it's called openroom.ca, and if you're interested, I'll share more about it momentarily. Next, winning isn't always winning. I remember thinking that once I finally won at the board, that was it. I thought the money would just magically appear in my bank account. I was so darn wrong. And honestly, it's a huge letdown when you realize that winning a judgment is really just the start of a whole new headache. Collecting that cash is completely different project. Totally different. Like if your tenants decide that they aren't going to pay you voluntarily, you're forced to file for debt exams, hunt down where they work, try to garnish their wages, and so many more. It's basically a second job. And I'm telling you this because nobody prepares you for how incredibly slow the entire system is. And quite frankly, kind of unfair. Let's just give you a taste of how slow it actually is. Month one, day one, rent is due. Month one, day two, you can actually start issuing that N4 late or non-payment notice. Now, plus 14 days afterwards, you can start filing the L1 application to go get a hearing. Now, plus 3 months or so to get a hearing, and then plus unknown number of months for potential adjournment, stays, appeals while you're still in that court process. And then now, once you actually get the order in your hand, it'll say that you need to wait 2 weeks before you can even book a sheriff. And then there are several weeks before a sheriff date is confirmed with you and your tenants to get to the actual eviction day. And then it can take anywhere from 1 to 6 years to actually get repayment of your debt. And that's only if you're kind of lucky and smart about it. So if you don't have your ducks in a row from day one, getting paid back becomes 10 times harder, and it can actually really screw you over financially. Your goal here really should be, how do I not get into this situation to begin with? Something else I learned, paperwork is everything. I used to think that being the easygoing landlord would make things so much smoother. Yeah, it didn't. It actually made things a lot worse. I tell every landlord that I work with or come across now, you have to be professional. And being a professional means you document absolutely everything. I mean, everything. Your rent ledgers, every single email, and even screenshots of your texts. When you eventually walk into a hearing, you aren't there to tell a sad story about how you feel, because no one's going to care. You are there to present a file. The board member or adjudicator doesn't care who feels more wronged in their heart. They're just there to look at the receipts. And seriously, I can't emphasize this enough. You need to get in the habit of collecting solid documentation. If you end up at a hearing, you're going to need to prep an evidence package with organized timelines, clear records, and everything laid out so the board member can follow it clearly. The mentality you want to adopt is, don't make me think. That's what a judge or member is thinking when they're sitting across from you. They want a clean, easy to follow file. If you don't show up with that, you're either paying a lawyer to organize it for you, or you're getting sent back to do it properly anyway. Either way, it costs you. We actually have a free evidence prep template on our website at openroom.ca that walks you through exactly what to pull together. I'll put the link in the description below. The landlords who use something like this from day one are always the ones who come out ahead. Next, here's what I call the 72-hour rule. This one's very specific to landlords in Ontario, but there is an equivalent in other provinces, so look for something similar wherever you live. So at this point in the process, the sheriff finally shows up and kicks your tenants out. And awesome. You'd think the nightmare is over, right? But it's not. And here's what you need to know. The tenant actually has a 72-hour window where they're allowed to come back and get their stuff. You're legally required to give them access between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. It's frustrating and it feels totally unfair, but if you decide to throw their life on the sidewalk or mess with their belongings during those 3 days, you can end up owing them money. I've seen landlords do all the hard work to win an eviction only to get screwed over at the finish line because they didn't know the rules for this 72-hour window. But if you're not in Ontario, just do a quick Google search for how this works in your area. Other provinces may differ in their share of eviction procedure. You might have bailiffs, but overall, the idea is to be real careful about how you handle your tenants moving out after an eviction. 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. isn't they get all 12 hours to move in. It is based on communications with you, your legal rep, whoever you decide represents you that day or those days, and you get to choose when someone gets to come in. It can be a 3-hour block, a 1-hour block, several 1-hour blocks throughout the 72-hour period, but you get to decide. So don't let your tenants who you've evicted walk all over you. Next up, Screening saves you. It is perhaps the biggest thing you can do to avoid all of these headaches. If I'm being really totally honest with you, most of that 35,000s I lost, it was my own fault. I was just bad, very, very bad at screening. I didn't want to be that landlord who was too judgmental, but that mindset cost me a fortune. I was really young and naive and didn't know what I was doing. We live in a world where tribunal decisions and court orders are public. The red flags are usually right there if you look at them. But so many of us, me included, decided to just rely on a gut feeling and an employment letter. Some just get a credit score supplied by a tenant applicant. That is not enough. When you do the heavy lifting up front, you find the tenants who actually value accountability. I learned the hard way that prevention is always going to be way cheaper than trying to chase someone through small claims court later on. But for most landlords we've talked to, I know what you're thinking. They're thinking the same thing as you. It's just really hard and annoying to do. But that's why we've built Openroom.ca, a platform where you can search up your potential tenants to see if they have any past court orders. I've also made an entire 11-page guide on how you could be better screening your tenants with free tools and more. I'll put that in the description as well. This one was the biggest mental shift for me. I had to stop seeing myself as just a landlord with a rental property and start acting like a housing provider running a real regulated business. I mean, you're providing a safe place for someone to live, and that comes with mountains of rules. You have to protect your assets and keep your records perfect. You really have to ask yourself, am I running a hobby or am I running a business? Because if you treat this like a side little hobby, you're leaving yourself wide open to massive liability. Once I made that switch in my head, everything else actually started to make way more sense. And finally, I'll be really honest with you again, losing money wasn't even the worst part. Losing $35,000 sucked, obviously, but the exhaustion really broke me. Just the endless waiting, the not knowing, and the feeling of being totally helpless while my own money was draining away to cover someone else's rent. You're here following the laws, but the other party isn't. And yes, somehow you're the one paying the price for it. It's mentally, physically, and emotionally draining and a really dark place to be. But the reason I'm sharing all of this is because I want you to know it gets better once you understand the system. When you aren't just reacting to every little problem and you actually know the steps, you can finally start sleeping through the night again. That peace of mind is worth more than the rent checks. If I could go back and talk to 23-year-old me, I'd tell her 3 simple things. Build a structure so you don't lose your mind. Keep the paperwork so you don't get emotional. And for the love of everything, screen your tenants so you don't end up in court. Bad debt is extremely hard to get back. And if you need help doing that, we've built a tool at Openroom to help landlords do exactly that. Openroom collects public tenancy records and connects them to the broader financial credit system to help you make more informed decisions on who you rent to. Because despite all the horror stories that you see and hear, you absolutely can build generational wealth and take care of your family doing this. I still believe that 100%. You just have to be smart enough to learn the system and have the right tools to do it right. I've worked with thousands of landlords now, and my goal here is to share everything that I've learned so you don't have to go through the same mess I did. Subscribe and click here now to watch the next video.